entirely students of color. The majority of male students. Male students of color are our student population in the state with which we do the worst. And yet they're having great early outcomes at P-TECH. And part of when you talk to the kids is they know someone that they now see as someone they can be like. Right? Every kid will talk about their mentor in that sense. Well, my mentor told me this, my mentor did this, my mentor had this experience at school. And that, especially for our high needs kids, they may not have those mentors. They may not have access to those mentors, exactly. On the issue of laws, I think, it's a tough balance, and I think for people in jobs like mine, it's a tough balance to figure out, what's the balance of creating the regulatory or legal context in which people can get the right work done without assuming that all the answers are in all the answers. And that's always the tension, right? So for every superintendent or school board member who says there ought to be a law, there's a school board member or superintendent who says you ought to get rid of the law, right? And so figuring out what's the right role, how do we create the right environment? The way that we practice, if you look at our teacher principal evaluation law, it's an attempt to strike a balance between a common state framework and local decision making. But then that moves a lot of the responsibility to local leadership, on both management and leader side, to figure out how to make the system work for kids. And people will debate, is it too tight a framework or too loose a framework? Is too much left to bargain? Is too little left to bargain? So we're always trying to figure out how do we get that right. My general orientation is that we need to have an environment that I would characterize as high accountability, high support. Right? In an environment that is high accountability, low support, people do the wrong thing because they can, right? If you're in a high accountability, low support environment, that's where people take shortcuts. And people feel oppressed by the accountability. In a low accountability, high support environment, you have lax incentive, right? You don't have a lot of incentives to do the right thing, and you also don't have clear transparency about outcomes. So, from my perspective, the ideal is high accountability, high support, and that's what we're trying to do with the professional development that we're doing and the support around the Common Core.
You mentioned something as talking about this being a resource sharing. I'm very concerned. I agree with everything you said. But when I talk to my friends who are in school, it's very little time spent on these issues. More and more time spent figuring out who's going to go, how do we try to keep this great on the future, knowing that we can. It's a very dangerous time, and I looked very carefully at the analysis that was done by the newspaper last week. How much is being put together in virtually every school district in Colorado, the community fund analysis they have, just to maintain services for another year. As I think about it, as we look out 5 years, our education systems, our school districts on Long Island are going to die a dozen thousand deaths. And something needs to be, first of all, we need to acknowledge what's really happening. And I just want to
If any of these people leave, hand them one of those.
great building business, great leadership. Everything else should be supporting that. And on Long Island, we have over 150 school districts. There's an enormous amount of money that is spent that doesn't support directly. And I think we need to think about how we can utilize our BOCES to do more than create voluntary sharing services package, but to shift basically the administration, everything from contracts to curriculum development, training, and all those things that over
He's missed the point.
It's just the other way.
Commissioner King's already taken care of all that.
All their time on how to piece together a budget, all their time on issues that aren't related to the very topics that you talk about. So I frankly think that the first step on this is to do a real analysis of what the state of public education is going to look like in the next 5 years, based on what we've seen over the last 20 years, and be honest about it. And then we need to be thinking about some major structural changes. You still keep your local school boards and have them empowered to facilitate, easily facilitate the sharing of schools and teachers between school districts. You take a school district like West Islip, for example, and they're closing, and many school districts are doing, closing buildings because the population has gone down. Nobody wants to see the local elementary school be closed, but they have to do that so that you have a maximum number of students per teacher. To get a neighboring school district, Bayshore, whose population is growing, is saying we may have to build more facilities. So we have to be thinking much more creatively, and frankly, more along the lines of what business has done. This is a model on Long Island that cannot be sustained, and I'm afraid that day of reckoning is happening as we speak today.
Look, I appreciate that, and it's not always popular to say, but I do think regionalization of services has to be a part of our answer. The Governor's Education Reform Commission yesterday held a hearing where two of the presenters one presenter talked about county level governance, and that would be a challenge no matter the size of the counties, but county level governance in Maryland and other states where by having a county we are able to scale some of the services that are now duplicated in the school district. We also had one of the district's superintendents speak about the role that BOCES are playing, particularly around shared back office services, shared purchasing of health insurance, etc. And what was striking is, in both cases, the question was how do you better deploy the resources to focus on students? And what was striking is, in both cases, the question was how do you better deploy the resources to focus on students, rather than having resources lost to administrative duplication. And so your point is your view on that is one I share. I think we do need to regionalize. The BOCES are a natural place to do that because we already have infrastructure across the state. We've made some proposals to the legislature for allowing BOCES to play expanded roles. We'll continue to make those proposals. I understand the passion that people feel for their local school district. At the same time, if the result of maintaining so many services at the district level is less opportunity for kids, that can't be the right solution. And so I do think we need a 5 to 10 year plan for what the structure should look like. And I have to believe that will involve more regionalization. We also have a proposal around the legislature on regional high schools. There are places where maintaining the local elementary school, even middle school, may make sense, but in the absence of merging high schools, there are just diminished opportunities for kids. And there are geographies around the state where where it's very logical to have a common high school, and by having a common high school, you have more engineering classes, more art, more music, more opportunities for students. But two other things in these long-term structural challenges. One is we have to confront that in many parts of the state, we have declining enrollment and growing legacy costs, and those together don't match. And so we know that we have in many districts, if we map out 5 years, we have real risk of potentially financial insolvency, but almost certainly educational insolvency. Districts aren't able to offer the range of programs that we want. And so we've been calling on the legislature and governor, I bring this up in my budget testimony each year, to tackle those sort of long-term structural challenges, to ask whether different ways to think about how we manage health insurance and be smarter to better leverage our resources. Final point, in the long run, the best solution to our fiscal challenges is the college and career readiness approach. And so, in some ways, you may not be able to cut your way out of these long-term structural dilemmas. we can manage the resources better. But in the long run, having more students who are prepared to succeed in college and careers, to start businesses, to support the growth of businesses, and increasing the revenue side is our structure sustainable. So, the first part of your question about reaching out to the business community, I think not enough. I'm not sure the public sector generally. Also, we don't always do a good job in the public sector reaching out across the public sector, right? So, I don't know that there's enough kind of sharing of ideas and models of success. That's something we're trying to do better. It's kind of one of the reasons I'm doing things like this, is to try to do a better job bridging the communication between the education sector and the business community. One of the challenges, particularly in the area of special education, is that I think we don't always make the smartest investment. To go back to the pre-K point, if you have universal pre-K, you will have lower special education costs. Period. I mean, and the evidence on that is there's decades of evidence on it. It's overwhelming evidence. It's very clear that one of the reasons students end up needing special education services over time is because of developmental gaps that emerged early and that were not addressed early. And so we know that if we put those dollars into early childhood, we can save dollars on not only special education, but remediation, prison, right? There are many social costs to students coming to school unprepared, not ready for school. And yet, somehow as a country, we decided to spend money on fixing things later, as opposed to the early investment to get it right from the start. Similarly, one of the places where we do provide guaranteed access to pre-K is for our special education students. But because we don't have universal pre-K, those pre-Ks often isolate special education students from general education students. Whereas in the K-12 system, we know that trying to be more inclusive and more opportunities for special education students to be placed in classrooms with general education students helps improve their learning outcomes and overall. So we know all of this information, but we don't use it to drive our decision-making, particularly around early childhood. So one of our challenges is we have lots of things that we do because they're the way that we've always done them. And how do we, as a state, ask a different question, which is, if you started with one piece of data, how would you build the right system for kids? How would you build the right system for special education students? How would you build the right system for our low-income students? How would you build the right structure of districts? So very unlikely if you started with one piece of paper, you would start with 700 districts. Right? So, but it's difficult in a political environment that quickly goes to black hats and white hats, right? Good guys and bad guys. It's very difficult to have a nuanced conversation that says, hey, if we were trying to design this right, what would it be? That's a great question. So one thing is, I think conveying to legislators and other elected officials this larger structural crisis and the appetite for hard decisions and hard choices. Because sometimes what happens, what I see in Albany a lot, is people may reach out to the legislator to identify a problem, but they rarely say and other elected officials this larger structural crisis and the appetite for hard decisions and hard choices. Because sometimes what happens, what I see in Albany a lot, is people may reach out to the legislator to identify a problem, but they rarely say, and I'm willing for the solution to be hard or inconvenient. Right? People go to them as if there were solutions that were never hard and had no inconvenience. But those solutions don't really exist. And so conveying a willingness to make hard choices, to the decision to centralize services in a process instead of in school districts may mean that some people who work for a school district today would have to work for a BOCES tomorrow. That's okay if it's best for kids. But so conveying that willingness to make hard choices, I think, is part of the message.
I'm a parent of a special ed child. May I please speak? I just have a question.
I'm happy to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a parent. Where are the educators in the room?
Where we are fashioning blended, accelerated degree completion programs to open access to the island. Hundreds of thousands of adults that lack bachelor's degrees for the reasons we know. Thanks for your cogent analysis and shedding light on some of the problems. As we discuss lack of readiness, I'm sure my colleagues in higher education here in the audience would agree that crisis there in higher education. And we are a link in that chain. You're noting that students may not be ready to go to kindergarten, and then they're not ready to go to high school. And then you high school and college, there's a mismatch.
Which I do.
The real
There's nobody that I
for higher education sectors that we are being called on.
That's what's so troublesome. When I have 10 years,
Ready to go to work. The University of New York, for example,
all parents.
sales for land is the top 10
I've gone to
universities in the world as the
every
University of
single one of
California
them.
or
Oh,
Virginia.
that's out of our
And so we're all partners in this chain, and when they finally get to us, I'm really concerned about the lack of readiness and the lack of colleges and universities to effectuate really meaningful partnerships.
I went to my school.
So that when we do graduate,
I did vote, and I did make sure I got the right. And this is someone who's never done anything.
You've identified
There is
exactly the right set of challenges, and I
This is just for you.
point about how the learning
Kids, listen.
technology
I'm watching.
is going to force
I'm in the
an
middle.
incredible amount of change in higher education. And the reality is that sort of the value proposition of higher education is in doubt. And that I think is a national crisis is the right word. Now, student loan debt, students' credit card debt, student loan debt is a growing problem, including students who have loans who didn't get a degree for which they borrowed the money. They have loans because they were there for a year or two, and the loans stay with them. Although they don't have the credential or the training, they would get them the job that allowed them to pay back the loan. So they're caught in
It's
this
out of there.
lifelong attachment to. Increasingly, if students know they can go online and get the same opportunity without having to build their schedule around the school, without having to take time off from work, they know they can get a course here or there. There's going to be strong incentives for them to do that. And frankly, not enough quality control of whether or not those courses that are offered online are very good. And so we've got work to do to sort of rethink the business model in higher education. And in those higher education campuses that are most difficult and responding to time, and those who are resistant to change or are going above it. One thing that's encouraging, and this is encouraging, is I think that students trying to get ahead of these just huge shifts in higher education. Yes, sir.
Everyone can see it. Excellent point. As a non-profit probably on C3, I am very much encouraged to see the business innovation trying to come together to try to tackle this big issue. What is your take on non-profit getting into this battle, this arena, and adding or coming together to try and make a difference with educators, Brookhaven National Laboratory, Commonwealth State College, whomever it may be? How do you see us coming together, like this gentleman just eloquently pointed out, getting the resources and the right people in place to look at these things and say, you know what, this is not my area, Because a lot of times what we try to do is multitask. And if I'm not a cook, why am I in the kitchen trying to cook? I need to be over here with my skill set strong enough for me to do what? On point to maximize my potential and be a team player on board. So how do you see us working together and reinforcing your vision for what you want to see statewide?
Thanks for that question. What you're describing is exactly right. This idea that we need to have the community partnering for the sake of kids. Right? And one of our challenges, I think, is that we do have lots of sort of disparate action. So a given child and family may be interacting with 10 different service providers. And the service providers aren't coordinated in a meaningful way. We have an opportunity. There's a new grant program the governor proposed on community schools, which is aimed at this idea, but that we need to get everyone around the table in a given community and ask, what role can we each play around a shared set of outcomes? I was in a school in Cincinnati a few months ago where they built a community school focus in Cincinnati. The school had a health clinic on the site, they had mental services provided on the site. They just opened the first vision clinic in the school, so students in classes that get them into the school. It's a very high poverty school. They also have a extended day program for kids. They have parent education programs at the school. And the thing that was most striking to me about the visit, the principal said, the reason I love having these services here is that I get to focus on teaching more. I get to focus on helping my teachers get better at providing education to students, and these partners are able to provide these services. The other thing he said that struck me, though, was we agreed at the outset as a set of providers around outcomes, what our shared vision was of outcomes, and if we aren't hitting those outcomes, we eliminate programs, we will change partners because we're about the outcomes. And that, to me, is the hardest part. Sometimes you can get people to the table, but once we get to the table, then they say, well, this is my area, I'll come into my area, don't change anything for me, you all change, I'll keep doing what I'm doing. There's reluctance at the table to commit to outcomes and then commit. I'll keep doing what I'm doing. There's reluctance at the table to commit to outcomes and then commit to be accountable for those outcomes. So to the extent that nonprofits and business solution leadership can sit down and say, here are the outcomes we want for our kids. Here's the data we're going to gather internal points, attendance, course credit accumulation. What's that? Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that. But the idea of community providers figuring out together how they will know if their work is serving the community effectively and adjusting strategy. That's what Cincinnati has done. Chancellor Zimper at SUNY is trying to do that with the STRIVE effort in some communities around the state. And that's what the governor's community schools are working with. Libraries and that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I know you have so much, so if you just have a couple more questions, the commission's been.
Yes, I'll take 3 more. So I have.
Yeah, Ken White, I'm a think about being a part of that STEM hub organization and reaching out to expand ways businesses get involved in the school system and use nonprofit process. My question to you actually deviates a bit from the Common Core standards, which I think are fairly well on the way to adoption. The next generation science are right behind that in the private. And I'd really like to see those follow suit. Of course, we got what's the pathway for adopting the next generation science?
So, just so everyone has context, the next generation science department has been very similar to the Common Core. We just see effort to develop common understanding. There are some states that are not comfortable with the notion of evolution, and so not every state will probably participate in the next generation science standards, but I think we will have a lot of states that don't. Right now, the standards are out for consideration by states. We are gathering public comment on the science standards, and we'll bring them back probably in September to the Board of Regents to consider adopting the standards. And then we'll need implementation strategy similar to the work on the Common Core. We'll begin to use curriculum materials, professional development features. I think one of the biggest shifts is the emphasis on integrating the sciences, the next generation sciences, which will be a challenge for some of our high school educators who are very used to, in New York, our very sharp delineations between content areas of the sciences, which is not where the field of science is going, it is how people are trained and what they're used to. And so things can take work to support that shift with teachers. But I'm excited about the next generation science standards, and I'm hopeful that it will work. Yes, sir. The challenge is, unfortunately, in some cases, the foundation stepping in where you want the district to be able to provide those services. So one of the words we have is that consistent outcome, where what determines the quality of education provided in the district is not the money the foundation is able to raise, as opposed to the funding for the district and the state. So that's something I'm worried about. That said, I think where foundations can partner with districts in strategic partnerships that are capacity building, right? So that they're not just kind of filling in where cuts have had to be made, but thinking about how do we build something that can be self-sustaining, that will ultimately attract new people into the district potentially, new taxpayers who will help to build a revenue base. So to me, it's figuring out what's the high leverage long-term investment that the foundation can make. In some ways, it's figuring out the things that are that appear as extras, but actually drives the benefits. And so, if the district is not able to provide, for example, the space for international category courses, that means they're missing that sort of higher level rigor target. There's greater support for professional development for teachers, so we can maintain that higher rigor target. So we have graduates who are prepared to excel, and we have that common vision across high school of what rigor looks like. That I think can be very powerful. So I think it's figuring out what's that right strategic investment. Early childhood, right, for all the reasons that we talked about, is another place where So, one of the challenges of policy discourse now is that the teachers in that higher work targets, we have graduates who are prepared to excel and have that common vision across high school of what rigor looks like. That I think is very powerful. So I think it's figuring out what's that right trajectory. Early childhood, right, for all the reasons that we talked about, is another place where one last question. You pick the last person. So, one of the challenges of policy discourse now is that we have gotten into this set of camps, test good, test bad, and almost all discussion is absorbed with this question. The reality is assessments are a part of education. We've had Regents exams in New York since the 1860s. I'm sure there were people who complained about the Regents exams in the 1860s. You know, they'll always be, there'll just always be assessments as part of how we think about education, whether they're state assessments, district assessments, or classroom assessments. Assessment is part of education. The challenge that we have, and I mentioned this earlier, is a pedagogical mistake where people narrow the curriculum just to the assessment. The assessment is not the curriculum, it's a tool. Understand how students move towards a set of standards, but it can't be the substitute for instruction. And that's one of the reasons why in our implementation of Common Core we focus so much on curriculum videos and classroom instruction, and the idea of rigorous, rich, engaging classroom instruction is the way to improve student outcomes for road test prep. Right? So that's the challenge. Trying to overcome that pedagogical mistake of narrowing of instruction. I mean, it's one way to move past this sort of assessment's good, assessment's bad. Because we know assessment's always going to be a part of the educational system. Let me show PARC. PARC is a consortium of states that are planning next generation assessments that will be delivered by computer. The challenge in New York and around the country is how do you build the capacity for students to have the level of computer device access that you would need? And I don't think that we shouldn't build devices for the purpose of assessment. We should build access to computers, devices for the sake of educational systems. And so, to the extent that the device focuses on instruction, that seems to me to be a worthy investment. I visit schools all the time where teachers are thinking in creative ways about how to use technology as a part of their instruction. I was in Central New York a few weeks ago in a classroom where a teacher has flipped the classroom herself. And so she videotapes all of what would have been her classroom presentations of content. She has, the students can access those videos however they want. They can watch them multiple times. And when they're in the classroom, they're doing problem sets that reflect what they've learned from her presentations. And so she's spending time in the classroom actually working with students on their problem sets and helping to tutor them. So you want students to be able to have devices so they can access that content. Similarly, we know that whether it's in the sciences or other fields, there's just an immense amount of information that's now available online if we want students to have access to it. That's the reason to have devices. You know, the board will eventually make a decision about whether or not we adopt PARC assessment. You know, we've set as a goal that the school district should build a device capacity to be able to implement PARC in 14-15, but not because of PARC, but because we think having that level of device access is important to instruction. But one dilemma for us all, you know, and particularly for you as a new school board member, will be what's the trade-off of investments in technology versus other investments? You know, I will say that I think we have to all acknowledge that technology is going to radically change education, just as it has radically changed every other aspect of American life. Quick story on that, which I'll end with. So my daughter, my 9-year-old, wanted to make a sitcom. She had this idea that she was going to write a sitcom and she and I were going to produce this sitcom. So we woke up on a Saturday morning before my wife and my other guy, and we were working on this sitcom. She had a whole vision for it, the title, and the script, and so forth. So we started taping the sitcom on an iPad. So we're taping it, and we did the first scene, and then she watched it, and she said, you know, I need to edit it. I need to put different things together. This isn't going to work. And she looked at me like I would know what to do about that, and I had no idea. And she said, literally, I bet there's an app for that. So she went to the app store. She put in video editing. She scrolled through. She looked at the recommendations. She picked an app. And I went off to do some work. Came back a couple hours later. She had taught herself. She had edited the video, she added subtitles, she added music, and she learned that in 2 hours. I would never have thought. You know, to me it would have been like, oh, I gotta find somebody who knows about video editing. To her, the idea was that information is available to me if I just go get it. And so to me, long term, that's gotta change her educational experience. Her high school classrooms are vastly different from mine. She's been bringing to those classrooms that says there's this whole universe of information about opportunities that's available to her. And we've got to figure out as educators how to marshal that. It's way more important than computer-based assessment. That's secondary. The idea is how do we integrate technology in smart ways into how we approach teaching and learning. So thank you very much.